I recently spent a few weeks in Taiwan and got to speak to Kuo-Yu Chuang, or Slayer, his way cooler English name, who co-founded GeoThings, a Taiwanese company building software leveraging SMS to share images and GPS locations, mostly for disaster response. This comes in really handy in a place like Taiwan.
We are kind of like covered by nature's hazard. It's an earthquake, typhoon, flood, and those kinds of disasters.
The country is a relatively small, densely populated island, nearly entirely covered by cell phone towers and with great access to tech. Over 90% of the population is actively connected to the internet, so it's simple to see how GeoThings could be useful.
This should be interesting if we introduce this idea into humanitarian sectors.
Slayer has also worked on the board of the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team, so has not only a technical background, but also applied it directly into building humanitarian products. It's also a bit hard to talk about Taiwan without at least mentioning geopolitics, so I had to ask. When we had a pre-interview, you told me that you can't go in a UN building, for example, because Taiwan is just not recognized.
Yep.
If you're comfortable, I'd love to expand a little bit on that. Has that been a challenge in working on some aspects? And yeah, just as much as you feel comfortable sharing. Before we get started, this episode is sponsored by EO Hub, a collaboration between Up42 and GeoAwesomeness. GeoAwesomeness has been a key pillar in the geospatial community for the past 11 years now. I've actually had the founders, Alex and Mutu, on the podcast before. They write articles, host online events, and when possible, organize in-person meetups. They also collect and contribute to podcasts and videos in the geospatial community. The EO Hub is a new section on their website that's dedicated to Earth observation and satellite imagery that they've built in order to showcase how this industry is changing our world. It's supported by Up42, a geospatial marketplace and platform. So if this sounds interesting, I encourage you to go take a look at it at geoawesomeness.com. I'll have a link in the show notes. So I like starting every conversation the same way. I like asking people how they would describe themselves. I'm quite curious, how would you describe yourself?
All right. It's like a person that is have imaginations on the future that can be resolved by certain of the service or the technology that we develop and can have some impact on the of course it's not a personality, it's just some kind of like people has this kinds of like wild imagination and so on. So I'm more like a person that I want to stick to these kinds of directions and try my best to fulfill that, to carry that out. Yes.
And you said with technology?
Yes. And I kind of like take a gig.
Okay.
So that kind of things. Yes.
How did you get into it? Like, because that's a specific, like there's people who see problems and they want to solve it by many different ways. And tech is one approach. Yeah. Can we go into that a little bit? Like, how did you get into the whole world of tech and software? I'm sure we'll talk about.
And we have been like years to develop those kinds of things. We realized that tech is not usually is not the most important things.
Right.
Like people or the like user is the most important thing that we need to carry. But we are also thinking that to create or to develop something that is like people feel that this is handy, this is kind of like useful or helpful to resolve some of their like daily workflow or annoying things. Something is kind of like I think it's troublesome to work with a previous way or previous tool. Then our technology or what the service that we developed will be a plus to those target audience. And that is something that we would like to focus on. Because, for example, previously, if you want to describe some things via telephone, some situation happened here. My car broke down in the middle of nowhere. Or there's a kind of like emergency situations, like a kid stuck on like on top of the roof or stuff like that. And it's just not that easy for people to describe the location and the situations. It could be, yeah, if you do that in like a verbal way, it or usually takes some time. So our thought is, hey, why don't we come up with this kinds of like a kind of tool or assistant that allows our user to quickly embed the location information and also to capture the situation with photo. We have a smartphones, we can have a camera, we have a GPS there. So yeah, we certainly can leverage that to make that available to our user and to be a tool or assistant for them to report stuff. So that's why we come up with those things. So if I can move that further, is that's also the reason why we started participated in international standardization organizations to try to make the location information that can harmonize with a short message, SMS. So that's back in around 10 years ago or 12 years ago, something like that. Data communication or data service is not that popular, but the short message is still going a lot. Yep. So we are thinking that hey, if we can tag the location information onto the SMS, that will be great. And a lot of location, they don't have the data service, but the short message services works there, and it's affordable and so on. Yeah. So that's why we come up with this idea to propose a standard, and it was adopted by the OGC, Open Geospatial Consortium, and also adopted by the ITU, International Telecommunication Union, those kinds of standardization organization. Yep, it's an open standard.
So I want to get into that a little bit more. First, I want to stay on the tech. I think you mentioned something quite interesting about tech is not the solution. Always, it's not the center of it. Like people and the users are. Yeah. And so we're going to talk a lot about disaster response today. Sure. I feel like because that's the area that you work in.
Yes.
And the first thing I can imagine is that when there is whatever disaster, like a hurricane, a flood, something like this, people are also not in their best mental space. They can be stressed, they can be afraid, they can be hurt, all those things. How does tech solve those problems? Because it's not like you have a user who's, we ordered some food here, just before we started recording, and you go on your phone and you're like, okay, I'll take that. But you have the time. It's quite easy to make the decision. You're like, oh, do I have this meal or do I have that meal? Yeah. But when you're in the situation of emergency, you need something to happen quick.
Yes.
How do you think about that? And how does tech help solve that specific problem where people are in this strange states?
Yeah, it's highly stressed and also maybe scared and so on. And I am also thinking that technology does not solve the situation. Mm-hmm. People need to do that. And for this kinds of situation, in our current approach, we certainly need to co-work with community, with the trained volunteer in advance, or the responders and so on. So for the kind of people, one of our cases, we co-work with community, and they will do the drill before the disaster.
So an exercise, they pretend.
Yeah. Yes. Table exercise, or even the drill that they will go out and take a look to do the inspections or the survey to the water gate, to the situations there. So those is more for them to get used to those kinds of tool.
Okay.
And to use the tool to feedback the situation. Okay, the flood is a kind of quite high. So already over the alert level or stuff like that. They need to notify that, and so the community leaders and the local government agencies will know the situation and know where exactly what happens where.
So it's getting people and tools ready so that in case when something does happen, people aren't stressed and scared or as much, because you can't help people be, but they know how to respond.
That I think it is certainly a level of the stress and those kinds of tensions. But if you have this kind of drill or the exercise before,
right,
you know that, okay, you are on the position that you should go to that location to take a look, and the another volunteer should go to to prepare the resource and those kinds of things. If those are not well organized or well prepared beforehand, then it will be kind of totally, no matter what kinds of solutions or tool that you provide, people just cannot learn or they pick up very quickly in that situation. So that's our previous experience.
Right. Yeah, I think it's something that I personally don't think about as much because I live in a place in the world where there aren't hurricanes, there aren't floods that much.
Yeah.
And so I don't have those drills. I'm not used to those drills of, hey, this is what you do in case there's a hurricane or in case of a flood. But it makes total sense if that is something that's a normal part of your life, that you prepare for it.
In Taiwan, we suffer, not the suffers, we are kind of covered by the multiple nature's hazards. As earthquake, typhoon, flood, and those kinds of disasters. So we really need to have those kinds of a response plan, in communities or in the local authorities or the central government and so on.
I want to go back in time a little bit.
Sure.
How did you get started working with this sort of solutions, basically, or this sort of decide that this is this type of problem that you want to work on? Because there's so much stuff that you can work on. How did you end up working? This is the kind of thing that you're going to be working on.
That also started from that location-based message that we can attach the location information to short message, because we are kind of thinking about what kinds of application that we can deliver. I actually a long time ago, I was graduated from the computer science department, and I write some code about Java virtual machines and those kinds of things.
Okay.
And the embedded systems, I even worked in MIT to deliver the multi-core chip back in 2000 and 2001.
Okay.
Yeah, we write a debugger on that. So that's very interesting. Yet I'm also thinking that what else that we can contribute in another way. So when my team, then I think that we can embed those in location information to short message or to make that exchangeable or accessible to different service, different people or mobile device. Then we think about this should be interesting if we introduce this idea into humanitarian sectors, because it's very important to know who is doing what, where, and when. So we talk about this kinds of situation is a single point or a certain of the activities in our geospatial world. If we plus the OpenStreetMap, which is the open data that allows you to know those kinds of buildings, road, and so on, so you can, together with this event, it will be much easier for the responders or the authorities to know okay, what happens where and how we can respond to that, instead of it's maybe two villages. It's kind of a separated ways for 10 kilometer or stuff like that. But if there's something happened in the middle of that, yeah, how can you describe the situations and how you know what's happened there? So if you can take pictures and send that associated with geo informations, and that could be a thing that we can provide from the perspective of the technologies or tech tool. And that will be the reason that why me and the teams would like to kind of like dive in further.
And so when do you, like, can you help me understand, like, what time, like what year maybe, do you start thinking about that?
2007 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's when we
2008.
start having smartphones.
Yeah, pretty much like
Okay,
that.
yeah. Because, so the reason I'm asking is because in order for that to work, you have to have, everybody has to have a phone, or not everybody, but a lot of people need to have phones, which can send location. So you have to have a GPS on your phone.
GPS on it, yes.
And you probably need a data plan to be able to send an image. Maybe you can send like a MMS.
Yes, but we do that in a different way. Is if you don't have the data plan, our approach is we write an application that can run in the like middle level or even like entry smartphone, Android based. So you will send out the short message, the SMS first, which specify the text on the location. So you will have a point first. And later, when you have the internet access, like you go back to the office or the like a city hall, connect to the Wi-Fi, it's synchronized with the like pictures.
That makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah, that information, the location is still important.
Yeah.
Data. Yeah. Okay.
And the description first.
And so 2007, 2008, you have this idea that, oh, this might be an interesting application. What happens then? Because, so the reason I ask as well is, but a lot of people have ideas.
Yeah.
But then to get it where it's used and applied, that's a whole other story.
Yeah, indeed. So I pitched this to the like inside of our previous my previous company, which is the E3, Industrial Technology Research Institute, and I think it's the largest research institute in Taiwan that funded by government, and the purpose is previously the private company in Taiwan, maybe they don't have enough resource to do the so-called advanced research or this kind of development. So Taiwanese government would like to, hey, they just started this kind of institute and they can do this advanced research or development, and then they can co-work with private sector that to boost our level. Yeah, a bit. So I was worked in E3s, and I also talked to the supervisors there and bring this idea into the department that I was worked, and also make that available to be the like international recognized by the international organizations. So I think that's how it started. So you can see that people buying this kind of idea, and also have a kind of project back in the that times. We even make this available to several of navigation application software in Taiwan, and also the vehicle tolling service provider. That if your car broke down in the middle of somewhere, you can call this number for the towing service. And yes, we have this collaboration with the navigation applications service provider and the vehicle towing service provider and also the operators together. Then we can send out the location through short message from the navigation applications and notify the towing service vendors about, hey, my car is broken in the middle of somewhere. I don't need to explain a lot. It's just send out the GPS. So it's kind of like back in that time, not that often to have like an integrated service that everyone has this quite easy access to the like Google Maps or those kinds of service, navigation service, and so on. So yeah, it's also one of the integration that we did. So from that point, we also push a little bit further about how I can work with a team to develop those kinds of like mobile application that indeed can allow to the community or even the like users who is not in Taiwan, it's outside of Taiwan. They also will have this kinds of difficulty or situations about, hey, if I ran in the middle of something and I'm not that easy to explain the locations and the situation, can I leverage this? So yeah, it's also one of the ongoing project inside the E3, that research institute. So we make that even larger. So then this becomes a spin-off the topics.
Okay.
So I spin like GeoThings spin-off from E3s, and yeah, that's why my co-founder and I found GeoThings.
Right. So you start a new company, which basically is going to focus mostly on that.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Which is, I guess, the point of those research institute as well, is to come up with new ideas and then send that off into the private sector.
Yeah.
Okay.
Indeed. So it's more about the new stuff, innovative stuff for the research institute. But if you trying to kind of like operate or make that as a service available to the private sector or to the like general users, then a private sector or a spin-off like a startup would be more suitable in this case.
You mentioned that humanitarian aspect is a big deal as well. When we're talking about the car towing service, that's not really the humanitarian side. Like it's really useful for it.
Yeah.
How did you then decide to move towards the humanitarian aspect? Because when I was, I do some research a little bit on these, it seems like the humanitarian aspect is a really big deal in the work that you're doing.
Yeah. So, because at that time we also get in touch with several like organizations like Crisis Mappers. It has a lot of like multi countries and multi cultures like experts who is work in the humanitarian sector for a long time. So we think that during or like we have several discussions and brainstorming there, and we found that it's a kind of like also a situation that the people would like to see how we can deal with it with a certain of like assistant or the tool. Because if you send out a rescue team or you are doing the like disaster responding plans or those kind of things, the 3W or the 4W, who is doing what, where, when, this is also crucial. But how you can get those information in time, still, it's not that easy to do that. For now, but don't mention that it's already kind of like 10 years ago or those kind of things. So during those discussions, that's kind of like enforce the thoughts or the ideas of it, like make this as a tool or the service that we can provide to those sectors, because we believe these kinds of technologies certainly can be a kind of like an impact if we can make it like widely adopted by those organizations.
So do you have examples of some of the projects on the humanitarian side that you guys have worked on?
Okay, so we worked with Asian Development Bank.
Okay.
That is a regional bank that doing investment to the infrastructure for the developing country here in Asia. So we co-work with Asian Development Bank and deliver our technology to the countries of, I think that is 2014 or 15. We deliver our technology to Armenia, Bangladesh, Philippines, and Fiji. So make that available to the government agency and also some of the communities, so they can really take pictures and using their mobile phone. So also talk about the digitization gap. Not everyone has a mobile phone. Some of them has feature phone. So we also think about, okay, community leader and the trained volunteers should have this kind of at least entry level Android phone that allowed them to really capture those information and reflect or present those information to the responding team or the a government agency. So we started from that, and we kind of that is quite a nice experience, because from Armenia, Bangladesh, Philippines, and Fiji is kind of covered Asia a lot.
Right.
Yes, and the different culture and the community that we need to need to talk to.
Yeah.
And also different disaster that we need to face too. Yes.
So do you have to provide those phones as well to people? You said that the community leaders and the first responders, I think, need to have those. Is that not always the case? And then if not, how do you, I'm guessing that's step number one, is to make sure that people have those phones.
Yep.
And because it's very easy to look at, and I'm guilty of that, of everybody has a phone, and so you just make an app and then it works, right?
Yeah.
But in a lot of places you don't have that. And I'm really curious to dig more into that, because I'm guessing things come to mind. If people don't have phones, is there service? Is there cell service towers around?
Indeed.
What's been your experience on that?
That need to be kind of like an assistant or the supporting package. That's why we co-work with Asian Development Bank, so that it become a project that the ADB can really invest those kinds of pilot project, or to know if that works for the later a sustainable usage of this technology. So at the beginning, of course, it's maybe the community member doesn't have those kinds of forms, or they only have the feature form first. But then this project engaged coming in and kicks in, and we have at least the Android form for the community leader. Then that allows them to really report or to review the situation when situation happened. Then the authority will know what's going on there. Or if you don't have this kinds of media or this tool, the only thing the community can do is make a call and describe the situation. But how we can digitize those informations and make that accessible to others. It's not just about you make a call and speak the local language to the local authority. If that's a huge event, international responding team will be there. So it will be even kind of more helpful if we can digitize those and make that accessible to other team, to the wider team.
So if I understand correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Asian Development Bank, they are kind of managing the whole project, and they're going to take care of a lot of these things, of making sure that people have access to phones. And you are they're your customer basically, and you provide one of the layers of the solution to them, which is once ADP, Asian Development Bank, has they take care of making sure everybody's there's the coverage, and you can work on the assumption that people have that, and then work on the software layer basically to allow people to tag, to send pictures, to send location.
And it's even a team effort, because we have the different groups of the experts there.
Okay.
We have the geospatial information system expert. We have a disaster information expert from the academies, from the those satellite, even the satellite imageries, service provider.
Yeah.
So they can, when the situation happened, they can task the satellite to get the latest situations. So the OpenStreetMap community can update the data, and we can provide the point or event, the situation, to harmonize those two together, so we can have the situation map there. So they will also divide it into like a pre-disaster and post-disaster. Pre-disaster, we can use this map for drill. Post-disaster, we can use this for response.
Right.
Yes.
Disaster charter, I don't know if you're familiar with that, where I know that from the satellite image world, where companies like Maxar and Planet are part of that. And if there's a disaster, they can be mandated to task specific images and have a higher priority.
Yeah.
Is it something like that?
That's one of the organization that we will talk to. But for the project that hosted by Asian Development Bank, it's for the drill. It's not something happened and at the end you task the satellite imagery. It
starts way before.
Yeah. So it's a kind of like, we would like to do this kind of like a project to prove if this really works. So that's why the ADB's allocate budget and even buy the satellite imageries and so on, because that is kind of like a beforehand. It's not after the disaster.
So you provide the, it's not a mobile app because it's all SMS.
Oh, that's a mobile app. So I can have a further explanation on this one.
Yeah, sure, please.
Because when we think about the SMS, we usually think about the like a message applications that are built in Android or the iOS, iPhone. So, but we still think about if we would like to retrieve the GPS like a location information, and also access the photos and so on. So there should be something like mobile applications need to be installed. And further, we can provide some offline usage map. That certainly needs a mobile application to do that. So our teams back in that, we still developed this. So we have the application that allow the user to install and to do these kinds of like online or semi-offline things or completed offline things. They can specify, okay, I would like to capture these regions and save the OpenStreetMap data to the phone for the offline usage. And we can send out the point, that situation event with its geolocation. We call that Open Geo SMS. It's an open standard for the geolocation SMS. Yes. So harmonize those. Indeed, there's an applications on the smartphone.
So that even if people are offline, they can still have access to something.
Yep.
Like the map is still super handy if...
Yeah, but you need to kind of like install those before.
Okay. And then on the receiving end, you were showing me earlier, there's kind of, I don't know how you call it, a command center where all of these things come in and the responders get all of that data back. How is that then used? So let's say there's 10 people that send something. There's, we were talking about fire earlier before we started recording. There's a fire somewhere. You get 10 people. What happens on the other side?
Okay, sure. I would like to leverage the case that in Fiji.
Okay.
I use this technology quite good by their National Disaster Management Office. So they have the drill, and they kind of like send out the fire department, police, and the medical team, and also the volunteers, communities, and so on. So harmonize those information. They even have it co-work with the school. So doing the evacuation and doing the tasking. So they in the drill, people will simulate that okay, I was hurt. Like people get hurt in the middle of this event, or there's some situation happened there. So it will become like the people in the drill use the application to capture the situation, and all those situations flows back to the like our system. So in the command center or the like National Disaster Management office, there's a big screen showing the map and showing the event, and it's keep coming in, so they can kind of like get what's going on there, and they can assign the team to take a look or even to take care of those events.
And so they get like an overview picture of everything that's going on kind of in real time, I'm guessing.
Yep, almost the real time.
Yeah. And then they can say, okay, we need to send an ambulance or the police or something like that.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's quite important to kind of like categorize those and they have a proper filter conditions, so it will not overwhelmed by like some other information, or it's kind of like we forget to deal with one of the event which hanging there or something like that.
Yeah.
So those workflow is very important.
Yeah, that the margin for error is probably quite small.
Yeah, indeed.
So earlier we were also like, before we started recording, we started talking about how some of this data is quite sensitive.
Yep.
How is that taken into account? Like, how do you guys work with that data that's quite sensitive?
So I would like to share one of the comment from our partner. It's from government partner, and we are
in Taiwan.
In Taiwan,
here?
yes.
Okay.
And we dealing with the emergency situations like fires or the accident and so on. Those is kind of like it's more or less okay to reveal to the public. But how about the resource? If we are working with like a shared management and the situation indeed happened there, so will that cause some of the situations that the people know, okay, I'm kind of like a short of water and the food and so on. And hey, on the map, there's plenty of the like drinking water there.
So you're talking about shelters, like where people go if there's, I don't know, a hurricane or something like that.
Yeah.
And they're stuck in they're like sheltered there with a limited amount of resource.
Yes.
And you don't, well, it's tricky to show, hey, there's a lot more right there next to you.
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing you can be afraid that there's like a mob or something that starts.
Yeah, it's kind of like a worst case scenario, something like that.
But it's a legit
indeed a consideration by our authority and saying that for this part, I think we should have a certain level of like it's not the sensors, but that is keep it for the operation usage. So it's not about we need to open everything, but from their perspective, it's more like okay, we have worked on these operations for a while already. We know that this is sensitive and that is kind of like okay to release. So yeah, that would be the kind of like a different principle for data.
That's so interesting. So it's not all data is like open the same. It's okay. So you have those. How do you work with that? Because you need to be, as like GeoThings needs to be able to work with those to provide that, or if you work with the government on the shelters, for example, are you outside of that and you just provide the geolocated messages and that's kind of where it stops, and then the governmental authorities take over and they do the aggregation? I'm curious, how does that work? Like, how do you keep things sensitive, basically?
Okay, we started from the like data accessibility. So we have the concept just like a group.
Okay.
If we are talking about something like social medias or something like that, you can form a group which allows only the information can be accessible within this group. So we can start from that, and then you can specify certain of the category informations that can be accessed from outside. So with this accessibilities that allows the like responders or the like authorities to work. Okay, if that's a resource, we will make the data as like within the group. If that is about some announcement situation updates and hey, people come to the like a shelter here, so we still have a room here. Yeah, those kinds of things that can be broadcast.
One of the things that I remember when I see this used more and more, but I think the first time I saw this was when I was in Taiwan a few years ago when I was living here, that when there's a hurricane, your phone starts having this very loud alarm basically from the government, which is, hey, go inside. There's a hurricane coming. And now I know, so I live in the Netherlands now, and we have that as well. I know it's not everywhere in the world. It's just like a few countries have that. Is that something that you've been a part of as well, working on? Because it's what we've been talking about so far are people sending data one way, but then there's the other way around, which is kind of, you don't need an app. It's I guess it's an SMS.
It's a push notification. Yeah. Pretty much like that.
Is that something that you've been working on as well?
Not that much, because that is more like a top-down scenario.
Okay.
So GeoThings is more like the crowdsource base, which is bottom-up.
Okay.
For the top-down, it has a lot of like a research institute. We also have the national organization for this, or even the weather bureaus and so on. So they have the quite precise the data source about the earthquake, about the typhoons and the weather and so on. So they can do these kinds of like a forecast or the alert, and using the telecommunications like cell broadcast or those kinds of technology to allow these areas people to know, hey, it's coming in like a earthquake inbounds in 10 seconds. We can have something like that. And we can have like, okay, it's kind of like a strong typhoon category 5 coming in 24 hours. So we can have those kinds of updates.
I want to stay on the humanitarian side. I know you've also been on the board of Humanitarian OpenStreetMap.
Hot, yes.
Yeah. What was that like, and kind of how did that happen? And so talking like, because that is broad and humanitarian, like really wide.
Yeah.
What was that like, and what experience did you bring? What experience did you get back from that? Because we've been talking about like the work that you've been doing, which is one specific application. Mm-hmm. And then from what I understand, and on HOT, the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, like that is all the humanitarian applications on top of OpenStreetMap, which is a lot.
Yeah. So HOT, the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team, is more focused on the OpenStreetMap data itself.
Okay.
And also now we are kind of like moving to our next living strategy, that kind of like our objectives to engage more with the local communities, and we are also moving to like to have more engagement with like a mapper, local mapper, and so on. So you can see this is a kind of like collaborations. The technology or the tool developed by GeoThings is more like the point and contribute, or we crowdsourced from the community. And it would be great that you can harmonize that on the OpenStreetMap data, that make the responders or the authority to know better about the situation. So that's why I'm so into this OpenStreetMap community, and also the HOT, because HOT has a lot of like technology built on like to how we can collect or to map the OpenStreetMap map data, and how we can engage with the community to have a more like a local mappers or the local force. I don't know how to say that, but it's a more like a more sustainable way to really map your living area, map your community, and make that available on the digital map. So one of the story there is about how you can really deal with this Ebola or the transmutable commutable disease in African area. And I really appreciate how OpenStreetMap community and also HUT contributed to this, and also the missing map community. They have a lot of so-called mapathon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a marathon, but we do the map. So mapathon. And we have the satellite imagery that are provided by Microsoft Bings, and also some of the available satellite imageries. And we start to digitize those villages and those community, make that available on the map. So it's very good that seems back in the Typhoon high end that it's, I forgot the years, but it's very important to have those building and road route available on the map. If you don't have those information, it's so hard for the responding teams, or you want to deploy those kinds of responding centers and so on. It's kind of so hard to do that. So start from this, we OpenStreetMap community provide those information according to the satellite imagery, and we digitize those informations. So any mapper all over the world, even you are not on site, you are away from that situation. I'm not in the Africa at that time. I'm not in Philippines when Typhoon Haiyan hit Philippines, but in Taiwan, I can still work on those mapping activity we call mapathons, or some of the emergency responding event, that to complete the map data, to complete those location informations there, to allow the responding teams, maybe they from United Nations, maybe they from the local government center, or the national authority and so on. So they will have a more complete digital information about the geolocation information about the situation there. Yep. So that's why I'm kind of very into the HUT, because we have a kind of those tech stack, or the tool that allows the community, allows the mapper to well organize. Okay, we can divide this area into kind of several sections, and each of the mapper can do from the digitize the building and the route, and then the people can invest. I can do the validations and so on. So kind of, yes, it's quite a great community there.
Yeah, because all the work that builds on top of it can only be as good as the underlying map that we have. So if you don't have a good map, you can't really do a lot of the work that you're doing on top of it after.
Imagine that if the situation reported and on a blank map, how to access that? If you are kind of a local people there, maybe that, okay, it's maybe I should go somewhere and so on. But if you were the international responding team, or you are trying to deal with the situation which you are not familiar with that area, you need the map information.
Piggybacking on that a little bit, what is the state of OSM here in Taiwan, and maybe of the community? I don't know how tied you are to. I'd imagine quite a bit to the. Let's start with OSM, and then I'm pretty curious to go on the open source community here as well, and because OpenStreetMap is can be great in some places and has less data in areas. I have no idea how it is in Taiwan.
I see. We actually have the government data already. But for the OpenStreetMap data and the OpenStreetMap community, we have a group of people who's really into the OpenStreetMap data,
Okay.
and they keep contributing and so on. I'm so ashamed that I cannot invest more time to that, but I kind of like keep the connections with the community members, and if there's some interesting things, or we have even done some like stupid mistakes before, like trying to import a lot of data to the OpenStreetMap data set. But it turned out our data source is not that clean as we thought. So some of the coordinates is wrong. So that makes us some of the like information that we want to tag becomes it's in the middle of the like oceans or somewhere like that. So with these kinds of like false importations, that really we also had learned the lessons about it's important about the data quality. It's important about to synchronize with the community and to know what we are currently working, and will that affect the community or affect the data set a lot. And then with the good data set, then people can make a good leverage or make a good use of those data set. That's also one of the topics that in HOT we talk about the data quality. Yeah, that's also very important.
So did I understand well? You said there's governmental open data, like maps of the country?
Okay, that's a government surveyors data.
Okay.
So Taiwanese government have done these kinds of like a geo information measurement or this kind of things for a long time already. So we have quite a good infrastructure, and also fortunately, Taiwan is not that big.
Yeah, it's a pretty small country.
So it's kind of like it's also an advantage to us that we can have these kinds of measurement more like covered, and for the telecommunication service, we can also cover the quite good. So it's compared to like a larger countries, it's different.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we already have a quite good like a government data. But because before it's kind of like it's surveyed and measured by government agencies, so it's not in that age about okay, we will make that accessible and make that all public to the like a general people, like general public. It's not about the like just the accessibility. It's previously we have the government agency have the portal, and you can access access all this data. There's no problem. But we are more talking about if we can have a more digitized information about the measurement that was already done by government agencies and so on. So now it's a kind of like a happening to engage those two.
So wait, I'm not sure I actually understand on that last point. Is it that it is accessible, but it's not digitized?
It's digitized, but it's not released in digitized format. So you can access from the government portal. But when we talk about the standard, it's not something like a vector-based data that you can directly make use of that and even import that as an open data, because that's still government have that IP or the right for that.
Okay.
Yes. But now it's a kind of like a different story. Government also tend to open those data and co-work with community. So I see a lot of changes in like these years.
The other thing that I was really curious about is language.
Yeah.
And so that's also something I'd love to explore and hear your experience about. Let me just paint a picture for people listening. So Taiwan speaks Mandarin, which is very different from English. And a lot of people don't speak English here. A lot of people speak English, but I lived in the South where you don't come across a lot of people who speak English. The streets are not in English. Like, how is that a barrier to working with OSM, for example? Like, can you put this street like this is like super basic questions. I also haven't spent enough time on OSM, but I'm thinking when you contribute to these huge data sets or you work with standards with characters that are not English characters, or like is that a problem, or is that just not even a big deal?
Should be fine, because for the OpenStreetMap data set, it's already supported like a multilingual language set. So you can specify that this point of interest or these locations, it has a different tag. In English, it's called something.
Okay, because it's just a new attribute.
Yes, it's a lot of like key index mapping. So we can even have a different like how we speak that in Taiwanese.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's it. Not just like a Mandarin and also Taiwanese, or even we have a different local language, Hakka, and the language is spoken by our native tribe. Yeah, those kind of things.
And then so these are also just, it shows how I don't know much about this, and I live in a world where most people speak English. A lot of like, I'm just curious about, does it make it hard to get people to contribute as well? Because a lot of code, a lot like Python is pretty much an English-based programming language. Yes. Is that something that you found to be difficult to get people to engage in as well, and just contributing in data or in code? Because it just makes the barrier to entry that much higher, where it's not, okay, you need to learn Python and you need to learn how to edit in whatever OpenStreetMap editor is. You need to learn basic English, and then you need to learn Python. Or is that also something that you've realized, or is that also something that is not a problem at all?
That is also something that's why I'm into the hot so much is
okay.
That's why the technology should kick in, because it's not about asking people to learn the programming language or those kinds of things. There should be some tool or like assistant that can already develop the layer, and with a certain of the instruction manual that's already written in traditional Chinese or stuff like that. So people can read through the manual and they know, okay, how I can start to do the mappings on this service. And it's kind of like a lower barrier, and engage with community volunteers or the mappers about, hey, I can contribute here. As well as even I don't, we still think that if you know some more about the English, you can be more aware of those kinds of like framework and things and so on. But we still would like to engage as many as possible. So with the local language translations and also deliver those kinds of manuals and so on, that is kind of like a must if we want to engage with the local community. Then have those people to walk through the register an account and contribute do the mapping, start to draw the rectangles based on the satellite imageries and those kinds of things. Yes.
So it's part of the work as well as making those tools. I guess it's back to the very beginning point that you were making, that it's about the people and the users, and it's making those tools a bit more localized, I would say, for the community that you want it.
I'm not even sure that we should move to that topic, because now we are working on with the instant messenger called Line here in Taiwan.
Yeah.
It's a widely adapted in Taiwan, and the people kind of use that daily in daily life. So that's also.
I just want to interrupt you there to explain what Line is, because I'm sure most people have never heard about it. Maybe, but so we've been talking about there's an app that you guys develop. There's SMS, which is built into most phones. Yep. It's Messenger, I think it's iMessage, I think on iPhone, but it's built on top of SMS. On Android, there's the Message app. But then most people in the US and Europe, they use WhatsApp, for example. And then what you're saying is in Taiwan, in some other countries, it's not WhatsApp, it's this app called Line. which you can do way more than messaging, by the way. Like you can do pretty much everything. But I just wanted to explain that because
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the information.
No,
but
I
yes.
lived here for a while, and everybody was talking about Line. I was like, "What the
You
heck
got
is
the
this?"
Line account or stuff?
I
that is
used to
keep in
have.
touch?
I used to have a Line. I use Signal more and more these days.
Oh, I see. That one is more secure.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a really interesting, important point that I think shows that we're so ingrained in our habits sometimes that I take WhatsApp for granted because everybody I know knows what WhatsApp is. And so I project to the entire world knows what WhatsApp is.
Yep.
And, people know what WhatsApp is here. That's not what I'm saying, but that's not how people communicate on a day-to-day. They use Line.
Yeah. So it's also from the experience in the with the community member here. So we see that for the volunteers or those people who will participate in the drill that we mentioned before, so about if there's typhoon coming in, and they can have a response, perform the response plan for that. But most of those participants or the volunteers are the retired people. And WhatsApp, English, it's a kind of no. But the Line, they use Line to kind of make a call, send the greeting pictures and greeting messages and so on. They use that in their daily life, so they already get used to those kinds of things. If we would like to have them to install the application that we developed, we suffered a lot from that.
Right.
To register, do you have a Google account? Do you have a Facebook account? And you need to know that and so on. My colleagues kind of we went through a lot of kind of a difficulty and frustration on that. So it turned out that we think, how about we kind of build our service and link with those kinds of instant messenger that's quite popular and a local community. In Taiwan, it's Line. In some other country, that could be WhatsApp. It's people know those kinds of applications and know already deal with this application for a while, and they get used to that. So the idea about the situation report or the response is the situation itself and also the location information. That's what we talked about. So we started from the short message, and we then have an application for that. Now we are thinking that both WhatsApp and the Lines have the ability to input or to attach the location informations that based on the current features by the smartphone. Either you are using Android or the iOS, the iPhone, and so on. And luckily that most of the smartphone now has a great camera, so you can capture the situation there. So through those kinds of features and the application that most of the people already installed on their phone, that is a great thing that, okay, we link our service to those instant messenger and make that as a procedures or kind of like a step-by-step conversation-based walkthroughs things. So the community member needs only to click through those options, single selections, and represent the category, the type of the situations or the disaster, and what's going on there, if there's casualties, if there's traffic blocked or those kinds of things. I can quickly select the situations or the selection that we provide, and then take pictures on the attach the geolocations. Then that's it. Then the responding the fire department or the government agencies or the responding team can receive these kinds of situations almost in real time, and which is via the application that a community member use daily. It's not something like, okay, it's a new one, you need to learn this, you need to remember that account and so on. So yeah, so that's also one of the experiences that we had in the previous collaboration and the project. Our community member or our user asked that, I forgot my account, how can I restart that, and so on. But with this instant messenger, it's already there, and you use that daily. So yeah,
I think that's such a great example of leveraging what people already know and use, rather than trying to think that, oh, this is a great solution and everybody needs to learn how to use it, and that's not how it's going to work.
it's it would be big if we can really do something like Twitter or Facebook.
Yeah.
If we can make us like that big, so people will like millions or billions of people on that platforms, and yeah, so it's already kind of like a ecosystem itself.
Yeah.
But if we are kind of like starting from as a perspective of startup, and we would like to provide these kinds of tool that can harmonize with like government agencies, humanitarian sectors, or the organizations, or even the community members, maybe we can start from something that is already there.
That makes, yeah. And like these social media, like they spend so much money and they have so many people working on these problems.
It is.
That it's just not comparable. So I wanted to linger on that point. You said that most of the people who contribute are retired, if I understood correctly.
Yeah.
And so I was going to ask about that, about the access to the phone, but there's also the tech literacy, which is how much people are used to phones and know how to use them. But I feel like we've already answered that. A lot of people have phones, but I'm realizing more and more that when we have apps and you can do more and more things online, like you can pay your taxes online and things like that. Specifically when you're a software engineer, like you and you spend your whole time writing code or on a computer all day, it's very easy to take it for granted that, okay, you go on your browser, you go here, you write the URL or something, or you scan the QR code. And we do that all day, like 50 times a day. But I'm reminded of that every time I go back home for Christmas or New Year or whatever. And my mom has like 10 questions on like, how do I do this? And then my grandparents come and they're like, how do you print this?
Yeah.
And there's this huge gap that isn't addressed very often. And because the people who are in that gap, they're not visible online because by nature they're not there. If you don't know how to make a Twitter account, you can't go on Twitter to say how hard it is to make a Twitter account.
Yeah, indeed.
Is that also something like, I feel like we've mostly addressed it by here, just everybody uses Line. And I've been surprised here at how much people, even elderly people and people who are retired, how ingrained Line is as well. And so is that just problem solved? Or is there still some aspects where you've found that, like, yeah, it's just hard to get to educate people?
Always hard to say that educate people, because if you are facing with the community members, those community members, if we evaluate that to be more vulnerable, it's a kind of like frustrated by the situation or disaster. Usually it's a kind of like have a gap to access those tools or the informations. So that is one of the things that we are trying to provide our service or our solution to those sectors or those stakeholders. So in Taiwan, we luckily have this penetration rate of Line app. So most of the people, even they live in remote area, they live in kind of like a vulnerable area and so on. They still have this like a communication tool or the instant message that they can send out or can receive. But we also think about a lot of location that smartphone, yes, they make a phone call, take pictures, play some games like that. So we try our best to think that, okay, what we can deliver from that perspective. So we cannot mitigate, or we cannot fulfill those kinds of gap that easy. But maybe we can start from the most covered area or most covered sector, which if we aim to WhatsApp, maybe we can cover the more people that are other than we have our application to launch on Android marketplace or the Apple app stores. Yeah, with the WhatsApp, there's already a lot of people already download that. Then we bridge our service. So we also think about that if we pitch this and we can collaborate with maybe the central government or local government or the humanitarian organizations to make them think that, okay, this could be helpful, not just reporting the situation or disaster, but it's even helpful for the organizations or the government agency to perform the kind of tasking and the arrangement. I can know where's my volunteers. I can know where's my kind of employees or the contact windows and what they are doing. If they are in the middle of something, so they see something we need to deal with that situation quickly, they can use this kinds of tool. The same. So it's more you can use this to the kind of group or the team management. Yeah, with the geolocation information.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like one of the things that might help with that is the fact that there was, maybe in Taiwan at least, more of a jump directly to mobile, where people started, most people got familiar first with mobile rather than desktops first, and then mobile phones happening after. I feel like a lot of it is jumping straight to mobile. So
yes,
it turns out the coverage is just way better here than even in places in Europe. Or
I even think that it also happens in African area.
Yes.
Same.
That's what I'm thinking. I know that happened a lot in Africa, where there was this jump straight to mobile and everything is mobile first. And so the tech literacy on mobile is way higher than in countries like the US or in Europe, where we think it's more tech savvy, but actually not really. So is it a bit the same in Taiwan?
I think so. So compared to the price that for the laptop or the PC, for the entry level mobile phone, it's more affordable, and that can bring at least the features we need. You want to make a phone call to others, and it can also build in some of the features that you are going to addicted to. So yes.
I remember that most people were playing games always also on their phones, not on. There's a huge community of I think there's huge brands here in Taiwan. I think MSI is a Taiwanese brand. So there's a lot of on the computer hardware side. There's these huge, and Asus I think is also Taiwanese. So there's these it's not there isn't, but the mobile market is enormous as well.
I remember that our revenues of the mobile games over the world, now we are the fifth, top 5.
Wow.
Already that kind of overpassed the German, and now it's a kind of imagine that we only have 23 million people, but we contribute to the revenue for the mobile games. It's a kind of already the top 5 of the
Back to that point, that makes this assumption that people are using phones. You can basically take that for granted. That people know how to use phones. Pretty much everybody has a phone, and they know how to use Line.
Yes. So we can go back to the question about what happens if some of the remote area or the target location or the city which doesn't have data access to the mobile phone, and our thought is then it should come in the humanitarian organizations or the NGOs or the government sector to come in, because it really needs some like other organization to perform this kinds of like assistant to really walk through and take a look to take care of those people, vulnerable persons or the location and so on. And our tool will become the assistant to those surveyors, to those volunteers, for them to easily get those information and the feedback to the command center. And for the people who doesn't have access to the mobile phones or those kinds of technology and so on, so we really need some other people to kind of assist in this situation.
Back to, I think, the example that we were talking about earlier with the Asia Development Bank, which is they are focusing on bringing people's tech literacy up, but that's not the work that you're focusing on.
Yeah.
Right.
We're more focused on the technology stack that we can provide the service, because GeoThing is a social enterprise, but we cannot provide our force through our direct labors. I'm not sure if that's appropriate to say that. We cannot go there on site, help people, but we would like to use our knowledge, our expertise, yes, develop those service, develop those technical assistant for the organization who really go there, be there on site and help people. And we hope our service can kind of ease a little bit of the burden when they collect the data, when they're trying to organize those informations. That's our purpose.
Yes. Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah. So let's go there. Let's go a little bit on GeoThings, on the company that you started. So you said it's a social enterprise.
Yeah.
What is that?
All right. So it's maybe not a kind of a popular idea. So usually we think about the enterprise is we need to go for the maximum profit for the stakeholder, for the investor, like this. But for the social enterprise, it's more like you need to take into considerations together with the different stakeholders, like your employee, your supplier, the people who use your service, or even the environment and this social community and so on. So with those considerations, we talk about not every private company is like that, but some of the company in Taiwan, they think about, I want to make the biggest money as I can. So what happens if I generate some of the waste water that might pollute the environment? I need to spend some budget and money to process that. Then I can let go of those waste or the waters. But if I only think about if this organization or this enterprise only think about to maximize the profit, then some bad things might happen. You will just let go this wasted water, polluted water into our river and so on. So from the perspective of an investor, he will say, this company making money, quite good, awesome, good job. But it doesn't really count the cost to the environment, count the affect the health of the communities, people who live there, and so on. So as a so-called social enterprise, we need to take those into consideration. So that's why we think that we are working and also interested in the humanitarian sector, that we think our technology can help. So we co-work with a non-government organization and NGOs. So we also co-work with humanitarian sector and so on, thinking about, if we can provide our service to those organizations and can result in or to generate the impact as we expected, that they can leverage this when they are dealing with the disaster or emergency situation and so on. So that's really the origin of the what, why, and how we found the GeoThings. Like how my co-founders Venus and I co-founded this company.
When you started the company, you started as we're going to be a social enterprise.
Enterprise, yes.
Okay. How does that work in, like, how do you assess that? Because to play devil's advocate a little bit here, it's pretty easy if you are just trying to maximize profit, is you make the profit number go higher and it's like, as you said, good job.
Yeah.
But here you're weighing things that are like more parameters in. So how does that work? And how do you make sure that you stay on track? And how do you have that conversation where maybe we made more profits, but that's actually not a good thing because we should be spending on these other things? I'd love to understand that a little bit better.
Sure. As kind of like I mentioned at the beginning about what kinds of person that I am, it's kind of like a crazy. I did not really do a lot of assessment and evaluation to this market and so on. It turned out it's a tough, you can say that market or a tough sector that if we would like to work with, because it's a good technology, and I really believe that the colleagues, our developers, is really qualified for any of the in information industry here in Taiwan, all over the world, and so on. But how we sales our stuff is different from the online gaming, or the different from that you deal with the enterprise that solve their security problem, and they can prevent the debt from the loss a lot of money and so on. So you can charge a lot. So compare with this, when you work with a non-government organization or non-profit organization, usually the budget is limited. And it's not that easy to really push forward for this kind of a top-down scenario. And also for the community, if it is not from government, if that is not kind of supported by some of the budget, it's also not that easy to really convince everyone to appreciate or to know that this is really important, to know who is doing what where, this kind of concept. That we do this before we have a drill, but it's okay that we write down our name, the participant on the a paper, and we just do whatever we did for now. It's different. So we spend sometimes several years. We kind of a contract and project based with government, with some of the Asian Development Bank and so on, those kinds of organizations. And yes, it's kind of not that easy to make ourselves kind of bigger. It's not something like a 2x or 3x growth. Yes.
So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is also just by the nature of the customers that you're working with, the fact that it is NGOs and it's governments contracts, you're not going to grow to such a huge scale that it might become a huge problem to society as well.
It took me some time to do that. My another co-founder kept saying that we need to find this kind of a sustainable business model.
Okay.
And we need to kind of, if we want to grow big, we need to find a way which is not just this kinds of a contract based, or this kinds of sales based, direct sales based things. We need to really make things kind of different, but still, to me, a while to realize those things, to realize that it's not something like you developed a good tool or good service, and the people will just say, hey, it's good,
Yeah,
I would
here's
like
some
to
money.
use that. Yeah. It's to have a startup or to run a company is a totally a different story.
Right.
Yeah.
I do want to go on that a little bit. You guys have been going on for 14 years, I think I saw something like that. Like,
I think this year is our 10
10
10th year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still, but that's a long time.
Yeah.
Seems like you've found a business model that works, at least. Like, to go for 10 years, like, the company seems to be working. How do you, like, what is the business model? And, like, kind of, so we've talked about, is it still just NGO contracts and governmental contracts, or is there something else that you're doing?
So the previous years, I think we are more or less the contract-based service, and we're trying to launch those kinds of service there. But we think we need to have a different approach or a perspective to pitch those kinds of things. Even we have a lot of opportunity to expose ourselves to present ourselves in the international conference, those kinds of things. But still, it's not a organic way to really approach our user and to make that is kind of like a growth, as we expected. So it's for the previous years, we are more contract based, project based. And now for those 2 years, we also would like to make that as a kind of like a accessible SaaS.
Right. Subscription as a service.
As a subscription based, and we introduce a user that can click through and quickly establish their kind of like a group or a team that invite their colleagues or the people they would like to participate and do these kinds of surveys or the questionnaires, which has the geolocation based information. So just imagine that if you would like to do the questionnaire based on current Google tool, you have the Google form, you have the Google map, but after you finish the form, you need to deal with some of the overlays, you need to put the address or transcode the data to ping that on the map and so on. So we are thinking to provide some accessible tool that can generally apply to people who have these kinds of needs, and that they can just start with the kind of created a group and they invite the users and start with these kind of things. We're trying to do something from there, which will not just focus on the humanitarian sector, but it's kind of like the wider group, which maybe we don't know who will be interested in, but it's more like we should, our next stage is to make these workflows smoother and to have some of the voice allow the user to know, hey, it's a kind of like another tool that you can leverage.
Right. So going more for commercial applications through like a regular SaaS model. Okay, that makes sense. One of the things we talked about when we first chatted is you brought up the need for maintenance and how a lot of these things, it's never really done. I actually thought that's where you were going to go with these subscription projects, where I'm curious if a lot of these projects are, if it's project based, I'm guessing there's a beginning and an end dates for these things. What happens after the end date?
Oh, that's a lot of story that we can talk about. So it's the international project that hosted by maybe the regional bank, like Asian Development Bank, World Bank, United Nations office, and so on, with a lot of support or the funds for that. And most of the projects, they look for the open source project,
right?
Which I think that is good. Allows the the user, they can later deploy, not only deploy, but they can maintain on their own and to operate on their own. It's just to us, we would like to provide from different perspective, because open source does not solve stuff from the root. How to describe that? Because you also need a professional team to really make that service kind of like running, maintain that, keep the like security page. If there's something wrong, the new iOS up coming up, new Android system coming up, and some of the features that is different, then you need to kind of like upgrade your stuff. Of course, that can be maintained by community, but then you need to apply it. You need to deploy that. If it is a software developer, that should be okay. But if that is a community member, it's not that easy, even for the government agencies. Okay, then what's the next if I want to upgrade my application or service to certain of the versions, or what kinds of page that I need to install, those kind of things. So we also think that, all right, so if we go for the SaaS model, then maybe we can have this kinds of service provided also to those kinds of audience. But we use this SaaS model and generated the open data that allows those sectors, they can work with their own data. They can take away their asset if they don't like our service. It's more like, okay, we are also thinking to work with government agencies or those international organization to pitch a bit about it's our service is not open source, but we allows you to keep everything that generated from this service or this tool. You can imagine something like, okay, you don't need to access the source code of Microsoft Word, but you can keep everything you write within the Word document, something like that.
That's a really good analogy. I like that. I'm probably going to steal that.
So it doesn't matter that you don't open source the Word Office.
Yeah.
But if you can keep that output format to be opened, that means the document that you generated from this tool can be interpreted by some other service. And that is the important part, because if our result is more like we can generate the OpenStreetMap dataset, if we can generate with a kind of a predefined schema that can be understood by some other service, which describes here's the titles and the situation descriptions and the attachment and so on, those kinds of things, that they can interpret that into with different visualization, with different service and so on. You keep those assets that you generate, but you can select that, GeoThings provide a kind of a handy service that allows you to pin those things on the map, leverage OpenStreetMap data and so on. And then you can also select, I would like to export everything and I would like to go for other platform and so on. Yeah.
So that means that you can still provide maintenance support as long as they want, but the moment they say we're done, they have that option. You're not locking them in to say you have to use this forever, and if not, you're screwed. So it's
a slight different meaning about people talked about the open source software and also the open data things, but we are kind of harmonize that. We are thinking, okay, I am GeoThing is a social enterprise. Still, we need to make it profitable and have the business model. So our staff, our developer, they are more worth it than you should have a good salaries and so on. And we provide a great quality of the service. So as a kind of people who one of the founder of this company, I really need to figure out how our company can kind of like move forward. So yes, this is currently we would like to provide our SaaS and allow the user to really work with this kinds of like open data way. So if you would like to use our service kind of like in a kind of like a freemium or the trial based, we allow you to do that, but you need to kind of like open up the data that you surveyed or you investigate, that the picture you took or the questions you answered and so on. So it will be public accessible from outside. Yep.
I think at the beginning you mentioned that tech is like it's not the hardest part. And what I'm hearing here is like it seems like that's one of the hard problems is like as you're one of the co-founders of the company, like making sure the company survives.
Yeah.
I feel like that's probably harder as well. Like,
oh, it's tough. It's I'm so appreciated that my another co-founder like she keeps works with teams with me, and we talked to our investor, we talked to our stakeholder, and our chairman, our investor support this idea. So yes, we kind of like survived until now, and we are now in the stage of Series A funding. Already went through that, so we are now moving to our next stage, which have those information we are going to collect and launch. I mean the SaaS first, and then we also target to some other private sector, which we focus on the construction safety, which is the public constructions, if you build a bridge, highway, and so on. And those kinds of information also need to be collected and to be responsive in time. Just we have a different type of information coming in. Before, we are focused on the crowdsource that contributed by community member, people. Now we have another assistant, which is the sensor. So that keep contributing the data it observed. And we will know what's going on here, what the level and the pressures, strengths, and those kinds of things. Harmonize with those data, we can co-work with the professionals to provide the insight about the safety of safety on site.
I want to move forward too. I'd love to talk about working in Taiwan and the country. And so this is entering this area where like if you don't feel comfortable talking about it, that's totally fine.
Okay.
But I'd love to get your perspective on working, as a Taiwanese in Taiwan, working with the rest of the world. And so, one of the examples when we had a pre-interview is you told me that you can't go in a UN building, for example, because Taiwan is just not recognized.
Yep.
And so if you're comfortable, I'd love to expand a little bit on that. Like what has some of your experience been? Has that been a challenge in working on some aspects? And yeah, just as much as you feel comfortable sharing.
Oh, sure. Yes. It's for that kinds of international political situations, it's some restrictions indeed. But we still think that if we went to kind of like a European area, it's more kind of like a flexible there. If with our passport, you can easily access it to the European countries and so on. So it's interesting, and it's also a bit difficult to us. But when you get back to because when we talk about the humanitarian sector or this kinds of disaster response, usually that will lead by these kinds of international organizations or the a government agency and so on. They are really the kind of responders, the key responders for those situations. Imagine that if there's a huge debris flows or landslide happened in certain of the city in some other countries, I think the city government will be the first a responder to deal with all those situations because it has the authority, it has the resource that it should take the responsibility to respond this. But that becomes like okay, humanitarian it's a humanitarian task or the missions and so on, because that is already government level. So that becomes some of the this level of the issues will also related to political issues. Yeah, that's also some of the difficulty that we might run into. But still, if it's lucky that we are the software service provider. So usually we can provide our technology through internet.
Right.
They can upgrade that. They can download our service. They can leverage our service whenever. So in our previous project, we also think that is a good thing, because if we are the hardware manufacturers, there's something like a malfunctions. We need to go there. We need to exchange those hardware. But with software, there's a customer feedback or the user feedbacks. We can look into that, update that, and publish that to the app stores or the marketplace. And the next day it will be solved.
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. Like kind of because it's software, you don't have as much of those problems. You can just, as you were saying, even when you do the mapathon, you can be
all
here
in
Taiwan.
Everyone can participate that, so we can kind of avoid a bit from those kinds of political things. But why we still have that difficulty or the issues if we want to get into the say UN building and so on, because we would like to approach some of the key stakeholders. We would like to let them know that hey, here's a new a service that we can provide. Hey, here's something that we can contribute. If there's already some international organization work on these topics for a long time, we know that, and we should go there and introduce that it's sometimes it's not something like you write an email and it works. So if we were there and we can kind of demonstrate or have the conversation with those stakeholders, that would be great. So that's also some of the our thought to be there to kind of deliver our thoughts and deliver our service to those stakeholders.
People can ignore an email. It's much harder to ignore when they're right in front of you.
Yeah.
Okay, but basically it seems like it's not, at least for you, for what you're doing, it's not too big of a problem. It's annoying, but it kind of seems to just stay
acceptable. But I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's also the level of acceptable, because I'm also still it's still a lot of political issue going on. So what we expect or what we thought is might be different from that when we were in the international international, what is it? It's a conference meeting or those kinds of opportunity or things like that. You still have some of the restriction that how you say Taiwan, or you say some other terms,
right?
Stuff like that.
It's like walking on eggs.
It's still okay. I will focus on the humanitarian sector and the missions or the service that we can provide, and to prevent those kinds of political issues that might cause the misunderstandings or the or even potential conflicts of that. And what we are trying to deliver is hey, I got a tool, I got a service that might solve or not solve, that might ease the inconvenience a bit for the people who is working in these humanitarian sectors and so on. So would you like to take a look at that? Yes, that's our purpose. We would like to make our service or the product impact to those area instead of to have a political
and just
saying and Yeah.
I'm a big believer that you have to pick your battles. You can't focus on everything, and you have to decide which problems you work on and which ones you kind of just don't work on, because it takes time and energy, and you just decide not to focus on.
Something you just cannot control.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that makes sense. That, well, I mean, even if you can control it, you can't work on everything. And so it seems like that's what I understand from what you're saying, is like you want to focus on how can we give help to people, and then there's this other thing that's going on, but it's unrelated, so we don't have to bring it up.
Yeah. Pretty much like that. It's also kind of like a lesson learned about if you start up a company, you really need to focus on certain of the like objectives. Then everyone has only like 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
You really need to choose that and to leverage and allocate proper resource on that, because you are not kind of like a lone wolf battle. It's a kind of like you need to work with team, and
Like just to close that quickly, has that been a problem for like opening a company and just getting contracts with, or is it just not a problem at all?
Should be okay. You mean that the kinds of like a political issues to get the contract? Usually, now I learned that should be kind of like at the first day I should know about that, but I kind of like didn't realize that very clearly. Is if this thing really solved the problem that the customer have, they will just co-work with you. They will just subscribe your service. Yeah. So,
and wait, you're saying that's not the case?
It is the case? I mean, I realized that later.
That it's not the case?
That is the case. If this service resolved the pain point.
Yeah.
That but how big is this pain? If it's kind of like I can live with that, or just okay, I can still like work with my previous way. I write it down with pen and paper and those kinds of things. Then, our solution doesn't that fit to those audience. So if the audience or the maybe the top level think that okay, we want to do this more in a more systematic way, it's a more like an efficient way that allows the administrator or the management team to know the situation easier, to know the what's going on where. It's more like more in time. Then it's time to introduce something like this kind of tool. So I'm also thinking that the big organization like HOT can also leverage this kind of tool, because we have a local hub, local chapter. We co-work with local community, but how we can kind of collect those information in time. It's not about the monthly report or weekly report issues by local communities and the feedback to the kind of like a hot management team, and make that available later, maybe 2 months later, or make that as an annual report to the audience. Something that we can organize data from you can say that the user generate content, but it's kind of like to capture the situation, to capture what's going on there. And through a system or through a kind of like a framework that you will be able to do the further investigation, statistic, and so on.
Right. So if you do provide something, you'll just find a way to make it happen. If you provide something of value.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think so.
I think this is a nice place to start rounding it up. And so just like how I like starting with the same question, I like finishing with the same question.
Sure.
I like asking people about a book and maybe a podcast recommendation. It doesn't have to be about anything that we talked about here, but I just like asking that because, first of all, books and podcasts are pretty hard to come across, like new ones. It's a lot through word of mouth, like you hear about it. And then I think they are quite telling about people as well, about like what people listen to and what people read. So if you read books and if you listen to podcasts, maybe there's one of each that you could recommend to people who are listening?
Okay, are we targeting kind of like a North American audience?
Whatever you want.
All right. But I'm kind of like boring here because my favorite podcast is more like the BBCs and
That's great too.
The stuff like that, because I think they kind of like do a good job on updating me what's going on
Right
there.
Okay.
So it's kind of like you can check my Spotify, and I have those kinds of like for New York Times, I update some of their like journalist release and updates. For BBCs, I think I like the way they presented the story, which might not covered by the media in Taiwan.
Okay.
Yep, they can say that from their perspective, which I like it, because I usually maybe start from the perspective in Taiwan. And I also need some perspective from like Western countries and so on. Yes. So if that is, maybe it's kind of like a boring, or
no,
it's
this
like
is great.
It's something like a news channel. And
yeah, but they have like really cool podcasts. Do you have a book maybe that you like?
Book, no, it's a kind of like I have already kind of like addicted to the digital era for a while.
Okay.
So usually I retrieve all those information from websites or those kinds of things. It's I think that is a kind of like a double edge. I don't know, but it's a bit scattered. It's a kind of like a lot of information like here and there and so on. So with a book, it's a kind of like more systematic from the like beginning to the thing, the idea that they want to introduce. But for me, I realized that I would like to invest the time to focus on a topic which spent me about like 5 to 10 minutes. And then I will move on.
Okay.
To my like a console game, or to like with like
no, that makes sense. Like
and so on.
All right, let's do a video game then.
So you also play with the console game?
Yeah, of course.
Or just because I love this kinds of like Overwatch first person shooting stuff, and I know a lot of people like Call of Duty and those kind of things. Yes, for me it's more like. I was so affected and so like starting from my childhood, the Nintendo like FC, and then the like Super FCs, and then those kinds of things. But I'm sorry that I'm not the PlayStation fan.
Oh, you don't have to apologize. I don't have one either.
Since the first generation of PlayStation, I did not buy that, but I go for the Sega Dreamcast. And then for the Xbox, the first version, and then now the Xbox, I think that's X or something like that. But it's if we talked about something like a business model, I really think that the Xbox Game Pass is a brilliant things.
So let me explain that as well, because I'm not sure everybody's aware of that, which is like it's a subscription. You pay like, I don't know what it is in NTD, but in US dollars, it's like 5 or 10 a month. It's like a library pass for video games.
And you can install it to your Xbox console, or even play that with the different access level. You can play that on your PC.
Right.
So that is a kind of like a brilliant things. I think is things. It's also that's why we also think about the subscription based service.
Right.
Yeah, it's a kind of like a for the project based things. Usually the organization that we talked about, they would like to start from the very beginning to establish a system, deploy it there, and hand over to the local authorities or the government agency and so on. But with the SaaS, with the subscription-based things, we host our service on like AWS, Amazon, like web service, and we provide the service so they can just launch the browser and the access to our service, or launch the like instant messenger link to our service. It's a kind of like a We are not as big as like a Microsoft or the Xbox, but I think the software labor concept is kind of like this subscription-based service is kind of like an interesting directions, and we certainly would like to stick to.
Great. That sounds like a wonderful place to end it.
Thanks. Yes.
Slayer, thanks for your time. This is great.
I enjoy it a lot, and thanks for the invitation for this podcast. It's my pleasure to be here, and yes, it's a great. I had a great time here.
Cool. You mentioned to me that you were hiring people as well.
Oh yes.
I'll put that in the show notes so people can check out like just the website, I'm guessing.
Sure. And we can leave our information there. And if you're interested in this kinds of like location-based technologies, like front end, back end, or those kind of things, yes, feel free to kind of like approach.
Do you have a line engineer?
we hope to, because that is we need to study on the line API and make that bridge to our service.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's not a joke. It really is a thing.
Yeah, it's really we really need that.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Well, great.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks for watching. I just wanted to take a moment to say I started a Patreon for the podcast. Episodes like these can take months to schedule, to research, to prepare, to edit, and I want to continue making more, so I started a Patreon. If you're not familiar, it's a place where you can financially contribute and support people who are mostly putting things on the internet. If you can't contribute financially, that's totally fine. Please take care of yourself first. You can always share this podcast with anybody that you think might find it interesting or learn something from it. That helps an enormous amount already. However, if you can financially support, I'd like to ask you to at least consider it. This would help me spend more time doing more thorough research, going in the field more, and just upping the production quality. I want to share more about the behind the scenes of the work that we're doing on the research, but also the editing, the work that we put in the introductions of these episodes to try to make them more interesting, more engaging before leading on to the conversations. The first post is a look at how we made the introduction to this specific episode. The animation, the script, the music, all of that. Either way, thank you so much for your attention. I wanted to show a little bit about the behind the scenes of where these podcasts get put together as well. And I hope you'll consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you very much.